Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Hey, thanks, Global Patties, and thanks, everybody, for joining today. You know, each week we get to talk about how much we appreciate our sponsors' support. They help make all of this happen and provide us the ability to bring you each episode. With that, thanks to Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today, and while you're there, check out Bee Culture's Beekeeping Your First 3 Years, a quarterly magazine for beginning beekeepers. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinators. Learn more in our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor and our sometimes guest co-host Kirsten Trainer, and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with the number 2. Hey everybody, thanks again for joining us. We have a fun interview all set for you in this episode with Ellie Symes of the Bee Corp, but more on that in a minute. Hey Kim, how are you doing in the snow?
Well, snow and cold. It's wintertime here in Ohio. There's no doubt about it.
Enough of that. There's a lot going on in the world and a lot going on for this episode. What have you heard out in the industry?
Well, of course, it's pollination time in almond country, and that's pretty much all that's going on, but that's a lot going on. People are arriving in California. Truckloads, right? Truckloads are arriving in California. I just did an article for Northern Bee Books magazine on this year. Did some research on how many bees and how many acres, and I learned a little bit. And it's you got to be in awe of how they manage to pull that off every year.
It's amazing. We've talked about it before. I certainly would love to get down there during this time when it's in bloom and just be amazed.
Yes, you should. It's something every beekeeper should do at least once. Say, Jeff, I got a email from the American Beekeeping Federation this week, and what's happening is USDA is going to be trying to introduce some natural pests for the tallow tree. And tallow, as you probably know, is bread and butter for a lot of beekeepers on the southern part of the U.S., and without the tallow tree, they're going to be hurting. So what the Federation wants to do is to have beekeepers touch base with all the people that can do something about this. And you can start by going to the Federation's webpage, and they can...
I'm sorry, Kim, that's the American Beekeeping Federation?
Right.
Okay.
The American Beekeeping Federation's webpage, and they can point you in the right direction and the people who can help. And we're going to try and get a tallow beekeeper in here to talk about their side of the equation on tallow trees and honey. So stay tuned for that. We should have that here pretty quick.
Well, I look forward to that. And just real briefly, Kim, because I'm not familiar with tallow and the importance of the tallow tree to beekeepers. Can you just kind of give a real quick recap on the importance to beekeepers and why the USDA wants to get rid of it?
Well, a tallow tree is an invasive species, and it was brought in as an ornamental, and it escaped, of course, and now it's everywhere, and lots of people don't like it. It reproduces rapidly. It's a messy tree, and it gets into suburban and urban locations, and it's just messy. So they want to get rid of it. So to get rid of it, you import a natural enemy. And I understand this is a beetle, but don't hold me to that.
Okay.
But it will naturally take care of most of the tallow trees. Certainly not all of them, probably, but And if the tallow tree goes, so goes the honey that it produces early spring every year for the beekeepers down there.
Wow, I look forward to getting someone on the show to discuss the issue and present both sides.
Yep. It needs to be heard.
Yeah. So, Kim, you and Jim, how's Honeybee Obscure coming along?
Oh, we're doing pretty good. We've got a bunch of them out there already, and I encourage people to go to www.honeybeeobscura.com and listen in. They're short, to the point, and we actually have a lot of fun doing them. We've picked some pretty, what I consider to be interesting topics, everything from what kind of equipment do you use to how do you examine a colony to, some how-to stuff and some what are you using kind of equipment stuff. So we're all over the map. And they're short, it's easy listen, 15, 10, 12 minutes. So tune in.
Yeah.
Check out the webpage and see what you think.
Well, it sounds really good. And I've obviously listened to all of them, and you guys are doing a fantastic job.
Jim's fun to work with.
Oh, yeah, always. And speaking of websites, Beekeeping Today has a new website. We released it in January, so I hope everyone has got a chance to get out there and take a look, sign up for our newsletters that are going to be starting up here soon, and we'll be adding additional features as the year rolls on. And finally, on websites and new podcast, we're working with our guest co-host, Kirsten Trainer of 2 Million Blossoms, and she is starting a new podcast focusing on all pollinators, not just honeybees, but all the millions of pollinators that are out there around the world, and gives her a broader platform, more topics she can talk to more than just the honeybees on pollinators. So we hope people can get there as well. Hey, Kim, you remember James Wilkes from Hive Tracks? We just received an audio postcard from him about the happenings there. Let's give that a listen right now.
Okay.
Hello, Jeff and Kim. This is James Wilkes coming to you. Just wanted to give you a quick update on Hive Tracks and where we've been this past year and where we are headed. It's been a good year despite the challenges that we've all been wrestling with for most of the year. I think I sent my last update in the spring, right when the pandemic was beginning to have an effect. And from a beekeeping perspective, our season was strange but good in terms of honey production, and in particular, our sourwood honey production was the best it's been in about 15 years, and so we were thankful for that. From the perspective of Hive Tracks and software for beekeepers, we had a interesting year as well. We've had somewhat of a reorganization over the year, deciding what our next steps would be, and we've reorganized in such a way that we can take investment funding, and we have a new CEO, Max Runzel. I think I've mentioned him before, and we've talked about Max, and he's come on board with Hive Tracks for this next phase of development. And we also, as we talked about before, we did this World Bee Count project. That was back in the spring, and we pushed forward with that despite the pandemic and ended up collecting more than 20,000 images from around the world. So that was a great little adventure in that project. And since then, we've been focused back on Hive Tracks and our current Hive Tracks application, and we are in a redesign phase right now and expect to launch the new version of Hive Tracks this next year in time for the beekeeping season here in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. And so this fall, we spent a lot of time and energy in evaluating the beekeeping app that we are going to provide in this new generation of Hive Tracks. We're calling it the Beekeeping Companion, and it's going to be a smart beekeeping companion in that it will use the information that you provide, as well as local conditions, both weather, land use, forage area, those sorts of things, observations from beekeepers in your area, as well as actions that they're taking. For example, if people in an area are adding supers to their hives, that generally means that there is a flow going on or beginning, and so we can use that aggregate information to inform the whole community in an area of what's happening, and we call that community intelligence. And so in this new app, it's going to be mobile first, and you're going to have very user-friendly ways of entering the data. Most of them will be you won't even know that you're entering the data. It will just be a byproduct of you using the app and taking pictures and things like that. We really want to enhance the experience of using the app so that it's frictionless and not viewed as an add-on to or a burden to your normal work that you're going to be doing. And so streamlining that, using everything we've learned in the last 10 years to build this new generation of the app. We're really excited about what that's going to look like and can't wait to bring it to the beekeeping community. Another couple of projects that we have on the side that are really interesting as well that I'd like to tell you about, and we can, as those develop, we can talk more about them. But we have some funding from the German Foreign Affairs Office for a project titled AI-Driven Climate Smart Beekeeping for Women, and this is really bringing a specialized version of our application to women beekeepers in Uzbekistan and Ethiopia, both as an economic development tool for them and as a way to bring technology in to help them be more successful with their beekeeping. And so we're really excited about that project and can't wait to tell you more about that. We're also beginning to do a lot of thinking about how to measure the pollination impact of just your everyday beekeeper, not your commercial beekeepers who are taking their bees into a pollination contract, but when you keep bees in your backyard, you're having an environmental impact, a positive one, we believe, on the neighborhood and the forage area of your bees. So measuring that, accounting for that, creating a framework where that can be accounted for has some really interesting possibilities that we hope to be sharing with you in the second quarter of 2021. So that's my update for now, and any of these pieces as they mature and develop, I think would be worth a longer conversation on your show. So I look forward to getting back on there with you sometime in the new year.
It's always great to hear from James, and look forward to having him back on the show and hearing his updates as we go on.
Yep, I'm glad they're keeping in touch.
Yeah, no, he's great to have on the show. So who's our guest today?
Well, we've got Ellie Symes with the Bee Corp, and early last month we went to the Almond Board's annual meeting, and we were able to visit with some of the vendors there, which is what my interest was. And the Bee Corp people stood out, and I got back in touch with them, and what they've got, Jeff, is absolutely amazing. And I think Ellie does a good job of explaining it. So let's get going.
All right, let's listen to it. And first, a quick word from our friends at Strong Microbials.
Hello, beekeepers. Your honeybees face a lot of challenges out there. Unbalanced food sources from monoculture crops, holding yards, drought, food shortages, antibiotics, pesticides, and pathogens like chalk brood. To overcome these challenges, your bees need the multiple bacteria that are in all nectars, pollens, and the environment. These bacteria aid honeybees' digestion and improve your honeybees' response and resilience to pesticides. Now you can help improve your honey colony health with a quick, easy, and safe-to-use product. Strong Microbial's Super DFM honeybee uses naturally occurring bacteria to restore the healthy gut biome of your honeybees. Check them out today at www.strongmicrobials.com.
Hey, thanks everybody. Ellie Symes, CEO of the Bee Corp. Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast.
Thanks, Jeff and Kim. Happy to be here.
It's nice to meet you, Ellie.
Right. So, Ellie, so you run the Bee Corp. It's kind of a fascinating name and many multiple different levels. From a business student, a Bee Corp is one thing. For us, Beekeeping Today, we like the BEE Corp aspect of it. Tell us about your company, what you do at a high level. What are the key things that you do? And then we'll start taking some deeper dives.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're actually spot on with the name. We are a benefit corporation in addition to being a company for honeybees. So if folks know what a benefit corporation is, we're a proud one. And so the name is a really nerdy pun. But we help growers who rent beehives to pollinate their crops. We help them assess the hive strength so that they can make sure they get effective pollination and reward their beekeeper properly. We do this through infrared image analysis to predict the size of the colony. And I should say we're actually starting to work with our first brokers and beekeepers ourselves this year that want to make sure their hives they're sending to almonds are strong enough to do pollination and to make sure they're meeting their contract values too.
Very good.
It sums it up nicely. So I think we're pretty familiar with the actual technique of this, but you're taking infrared pictures of hives, and I'm an almond grower, and I've got 1,000 acres of almonds, so I'm going to rent probably 2,000 colonies, maybe more. Mm-hmm. And the beekeeper then is going to move them in on a certain date. And what happens then with you and the beehives?
Yeah, absolutely. So after the hives are moved in and settled for a couple of days, we come in at night to take images of those hives with our infrared cameras. We typically take a picture of each side of the pallet for these hives that are on pallets and commercial apiaries. And then once we've finished taking pictures, those are actually processed up through our cloud software. And the prediction shows up on our web app report for our growers. So it's all automatic after we've actually gone out there and taken the pictures running around at night. We always check it to make sure it looks good and nothing looks too crazy. But then that way the grower and beekeeper can work together really quickly, even the next day, to correct changes if need be.
So I'm looking at, I'm the grower again, and I've looked at your webpage just because I was curious, and what I'm seeing is a map of the orchard, and on that map I can see where clusters of bees are, and the cluster of bees that I'm looking on that map on your webpage is a pallet. Is that correct?
It's typically that pin is going to tell you the number of hives at that drop. Okay. So drop is what we typically use in the industry for a group of pallets in the orchard. There's typically anywhere from 2 to 6 pallets per drop, and those drops are about a quarter mile apart from each other, typically. So that pin is showing you the average grade for that drop and how many hives were graded at that drop as well. And just to back up too, for listeners, all of this is available. Kim is referencing our demo account is available through our website so that anyone can get in on there and see what the web app looks like.
Yeah, it's a good demonstration.
Thank you.
It's great. It's a great resource on your website. But before we get there, and for those listeners who may not be familiar with the almond pollination process and beekeepers, what is hive grading? I mean, is that like A, B, C, D? Is that why is that of interest to anybody, and who benefits?
Yeah, great question. So I'll try to address as many of those as I can. So hive grading was developed as a way to distinguish between different qualities of hives. All of us are beekeepers. We've had hives that are weaker, slower to grow in the spring, some of them that don't make it through winter. There's different colony sizes in your hives. And so this was set up to reward beekeepers for high strength hives, but also to make sure every hive that grower is paying for is sending foragers to the field. So hive grades are done based on a frame strength. And what that means is, and that's when I referred to manual inspections earlier, is in a manual inspection, the inspector is actually, he's not checking for feed. He's not checking for the queen. It's a very quick inspection where he's looking at the frames that are covered with bees and counting those frames on the top and bottom box. So typically a hive that's under 4 frames is actually not going to send foragers to the field. They're going to be busy enough with in-home tasks in the hive. And so the whole hive grading process was set up so that growers made sure at $200 a hive, they were getting bees in the field to pollinate their crop. But then on the high end, they've started rewarding beekeepers as well for ultra strong hives too.
So how many frames of bees do I want in a hive if I'm a grower?
An almond grower wants an average of 8 frames of bees per across their acreage, just on an average basis.
On an average basis. So we talked to Brittany Goodrich, an ag economist, a while back about kind of the same subject, and her direction was going in maybe if I can get more colonies at 6 or 7 frames per acre, but pay less for the colony than I'm paying for 8 frames or more per acre, I'm going to come out the same. So do you work with that with a grower and a beekeeper?
Yeah, I think Brittany would be on a similar page as us, and a lot of growers are, that really frames per acre is how we need to be thinking about this versus a frame average, because she's exactly right. You can get the foragers in your field by renting more weaker hives, so you're going to pay less per hive, but you'll have to rent more of them. Or on the flip side, a lot of growers do this too. You can pay top dollar and get a 12 frame average, and you don't have to rent as many per acre. You can get away with maybe 1.25, 1.5 per acre. So that's typically the game they're playing. We find that most of our growers that are grading their hives are seeking those stronger hives, because a stronger hive is going to send out proportionally more bees than a weaker hive. I think the stat that I put in a report today actually was a hive with 10,000 bees versus a hive with 20,000 bees. That 20,000 bee hive is going to send 7 times more bees to the field. So that's just a way to appreciate how many more foragers you're getting out of those strong hives.
That's interesting.
It is. Could a beekeeper, before moving bees into the orchard, if I got bees in a holding yard someplace around San Diego, could I have your people come in and examine my bees before I even ever move them, so that I don't move the weak ones and only take the strong ones?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing with some beekeepers and brokers this year.
That makes a lot of sense on both sides of the coin, because the beekeeper doesn't do a lot of work that doesn't need to be done, and the grower doesn't have to either get more colonies or figure out what to do next. So it sounds like this is beneficial for not only the grower but the beekeeper.
Exactly, and that was important to us. So all of this technology was funded by a National Science Foundation grant that we're actually still operating on, that we first got back in 2018. And they actually had us go out in the industry and do interviews first before building technology from this grant. And we really wanted to make sure what we were building was good for both sides. because right now the manual grading process is problematic for both sides. So that was really important to us, especially coming at this company from starting off as hobbyist beekeepers ourselves.
You can definitely see the advantages of a non-invasive inspection of the hive or grading of the hive as opposed to all the problems. If someone's quickly going through the hives and looking at frames and putting them back, all sorts of damage could happen.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And disease can be spread if you're not cleaning your tools properly. You're also disturbing pollination. There's many reasons, but yes, it's a way to help the beekeeper out, as well as the grower. There's impacts on both sides to not have to open those hives up.
Well, I can also see the advantage, not only to that advantage, but I've watched commercial grading operations go through an orchard, and you've got somebody driving the truck, somebody sitting in the cab, and 3 people in back. And when they come to a group of colonies, the guys in the back jump out and they start opening and counting, and the guy in the cab jumps out and he starts writing it down. So you've got 4 or 5 people labor where your crew has 1 person?
Yeah, we typically work in teams of 2 just so that there's 2 people together while you're running around an orchard in the middle of the night for safety reasons.
That makes sense.
Right. Yes, it could be 1 person. So 1 person can grade over 1,000 hives in a night.
Wow.
That's amazing. Wow.
It's pretty fast.
Another question that I had, the assumption is, and I use that word very carefully, that when you're taking infrared at night, you're going to have variables with temperature, external temperature, and do you run into variables of the material that the hives are made out of?
Yeah, we do. So firstly, on your temperature, we actually bring with us a little beacon sensor that allows us to get microclimate information on that exact drop so that we're not relying on weather stations. That's one way. And that information is actually quite important for the calculations that model is doing. And then on hive equipment, our model has been able to work on all types of wood equipment, all types of paint, even metallic paint. We were lucky enough to test with a beekeeper a couple months ago. So we're happy to see that working. And we are actually working on additional hive material types in partnership with a larger company that sees these used internationally. So one of those main ones, and we found this a lot in Australia, is plastic hives used in commercial production in other countries. It's not very common here in the U.S., but that's our next step to build out for that type of equipment.
You're sort of removing all of the variables, which is good.
Yes, exactly.
So we have, so you mentioned, I'm trying to step through this process on grading the hive. So we established that they can be done before they're moved to an orchard while they're in a holding yard. What about, so typically are they graded once they're dropped a weekend before they leave? Because I mean, I can imagine if they're graded before they get there, you could have a queen die somewhere along the line. And then all of a sudden you have a weaker hive than what you first started out with, not relatively speaking. Is this graded once or twice or 3 times during the pollination season?
I'm going to answer the grower side, what the growers do, and then I can answer what the brokers do. And then I'm going to broadly talk about other crops because it's different depending on the crop. So typical almond grower he's going to want to know before bloom, because he's going to want to know that those hives, once those flowers hit, are going to be strong enough to work. And so that he has time to correct and make changes. So we try to get there before bloom, or, when the trees are blooming like 10, 15%, we try to get out there pretty early. The hives themselves try to get set at least a week before bloom. Typically we see. So that's the grower. The broker, which is another major party that's growing or grading. The broker is grading when the hives show up from the beekeeper, because he needs to make sure he has a record of what was sent to him, the quality. That way is if something declined, that beekeeper's protected. Then he grades, typically in the orchard, so similar to what the grower needs, or we do that. And then the broker actually wants to grade before he sends those bees back to the beekeeper, because again, he wants a record of the strength that hive ended up on, just in case something happens in transportation. So multiple times for the broker, but then some crops, if they have a longer pollination window, like blueberries, need to check those bees more often because of what you mentioned, like queen issues, disease issues. For almonds, it's a short enough period to where you can get away with one on the growing side.
So we're grading hives, they move them into place. Who is paying for
absolutely.
the Bee Corp?
So our growers that we work with, it's just a contract. They tell us how many hives to come out and grade. That was really important to us. We wanted to match what these growers are used to in purchasing inputs and technology. So it's really simple. It's just probably even more simple than some of their pollination contracts. So we have grower customers that are paying us to be a third-party grader. And then we also have beekeeper broker customers that are paying us as well to, like I mentioned, make sure those hives are good to go before they send them, so that they know they're going to hit their contract and get paid.
So you're not doing 1,000, you're not doing a truckload of bee hives, you're not grading a truckload. Are you taking a percentage of those
question.
hives?
It depends on the customer. We have some customers doing a small percentage that are quite large, some customers doing 100%. Typically, we're finding that we're around 25 to 30% on average, which is higher than the manual inspection typical rate, which is typically 10 to 15. Partly just because I think we're faster, we can do more and get them a more representative sample. But it's for us, it's dependent on the grower or the beekeeper and broker, what their objectives are, and we leave it totally up to them.
Very good. And then they grade it at night, and the reports are available online in the morning? I mean, are they that
next
quick?
Day, we guarantee 48 hours just in case something happens, but typically we're alerting that grower the next day that it's ready to go. So
you're doing a lot of back-end processing, and so that's where the rubber meets the road, if you will, is back in your servers where you're analyzing those photographs to some algorithm and then producing your quality
Exactly.
report.
So once that image is uploaded, it's about 4 seconds per image to run through the processing chain and get populated in the web app.
That's amazing.
Well, that would be fun to peek into that.
It's pretty fun to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a whole process, and that goes for almonds or what. So
yeah, that was the next question. Is I'm sure you're not only in almonds, and it sounds like you're not only in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. So this year, it's been really important for us to expand. So we're actually working with berry growers. We're working with seed growers, and actually hoping to do some honey production for some beekeepers down under in New Zealand. So doing the Manuka honey down there. So that's something we're pretty excited about. And from there, we hope to continue to expand to additional crop markets, apples, Canadian canola production are in our sights. But we're excited to continue to bring the learnings we've gotten from almond growers and almond pollination and help other growers optimize this input and help beekeepers as well prove their value and make sure they're getting what they deserve on other pollination contracts, not just almonds.
That
really
not only
good.
sounds good, but let me take it a step further from a beekeeper's perspective who is looking in the U.S. anymore. The honey market is almost not worth chasing because of the competition with imports. So my selling point as a beekeeper is the strongest hives you can rent, and I can prove it because of data that you supply. So if I'm in an apple orchard in Oregon and the apple crop moves north a little bit to Washington, I can go to the Washington growers and say, look, my bees right now are this strength and they're going to cost you this much. And from a beekeeper's perspective, that sounds like a really good deal, a really lucrative product to chase.
Especially those beekeepers that want to get the premium contracts that have good roads, good spot for bees, good water sources, contracts they can put all their hives in one orchard and not have to move around too much. So I think particularly for those beekeepers trying to get the premium contracts or trying to expand, it's a really helpful way to be able to build trust with your grower, to show records on what you've been able to achieve in strength, either what you have now or what you've achieved in pollination seasons past.
Not only that, it shows you where not to put your resources. If I'm a beekeeper, I got 4 pallets over here that got 2 frames of bees, and I know it without having to look. Where I don't even put them on the truck. I just leave them there to build up for a later crop, maybe.
Yes, exactly. And beekeepers are doing that. They're just doing that manually. If they can, if they're not in too cold of a climate where they can't get into the hives before sending them to California, for example. But that's I think an interesting value is now those cold climate beekeepers can check those hives, not put the ones on the truck that aren't even going to make it to California. And those beekeepers that are warm climate that are digging through all those hives don't have to spend that amount of time doing that very labor intensive process, especially during their busiest time of the year. So you're hitting on, I think, a value proposition that we're quite excited about and we've seen excitement about.
I can see that, yes. Are you able to examine colonies in indoor wintering facilities?
We've not tested that yet. We've gotten a lot of interest from that. It frankly would be easier than dealing with the ambient conditions that we deal with in the orchards that are changing quite a bit. So we're hoping to test that soon. We've gotten interest from some other companies and beekeepers on that. And we just need to be able to get in there and sample and run some population tests to do it. Yep. But we're hoping to have that figured out.
I think the problem would be, if there was one, you said that you photograph all 4 sides of the pallet.
2 sides, the 2 entrances.
Oh, yeah. Only 2 sides. Okay, well, that you could do inside, sitting on stacks of shelves. Yeah, okay. Well, that would be, from an indoor wintering perspective, that also would have value in terms of what do I leave here?
Definitely. I think for us, it's just been it's a data collection challenge to making sure. I mean, when we do our testing, our internal testing, we need to open up that hive and get that population checked. That way we can make sure the model's accurate. So we'll have to do a planned study where we're not getting on a big scissor lift to open up those top hives. And so it might actually have to be a study that's not done during the winter. So we're hoping to do that and coordinate with someone we can do that with.
And you wouldn't have to do it at night.
Exactly. That's what I said. It's a lot easier as far as ambient conditions.
Well, I'm going to guess that the biggest question you have asked is, what's this going to cost me?
Yeah, great question. So it depends on volume, where it's cheaper for more hives. For grower pricing, it typically comes out to about $2 to $8 per hive. Again, depending on how many hives they scan. But then we do have partner pricing for our large beekeepers that are doing 10, 20, 30,000 hives, and they are fine with imaging themselves. We work out partner pricing where we train you, you get a camera, and then you pay a much cheaper per hive price for that. But for growers, it's pretty standard.
Sounds like quite a deal. And I can see where it would pay to learn how to do this myself and just download the data and get a report tomorrow morning.
Yes, exactly. We definitely wanted to make sure that, especially large growers or large beekeepers could do this themselves and make sure it was affordable for that type of beekeeper too.
What about the online access to my information for my bees, or how's that protected? Is that protected from my competitor across the road? And what safeguards are in place?
No one can view anyone else's hive grades or locations. So if the grower is our customer, the grower has access to his report only, and he could see everything. If he wants to forward it to the beekeeper, he can actually export the report and send it to his different beekeepers. He can filter by beekeeper, so he's only sending each beekeeper their information. We also want to soon have it set up where you could have different accounts where that grower's beekeepers can all log on. But no grower can view any other grower's information. No beekeeper can view any other beekeeper's information. And then all the data itself is encrypted and protected in our database as well. So definitely that's a huge thing for us. And we would never want to reveal beekeepers' locations, especially holding yards, honey sites. There's multiple reasons why that's an issue, but yes, that information is not shared.
Sounds like another dozen passwords I'm going to have to remember.
We'll let you reset it as many times as you want.
Do any of your growers or any of your beekeepers, are they concerned about, I've got my bees in this orchard, but what about the orchards surrounding me? And I could have really strong bees, and if everybody on each side of me has really, really weak bees, my bees are going to get diluted farther than I want them, probably.
They need to go over to their neighbor's yard and tell them about how much they like Verifli and get a referral discount from us for doing so.
Okay.
You're exactly right. There's more benefits if we can get sort of neighborhood level data for growers if they're interested in that. But yes, it's definitely a concern. Really, I think at that 8-frame average, those growers are making sure they have more than enough to account for that. But they communicate quite a bit. A grower will go to his neighbors if he sees he's not putting out bees a certain year. So maybe that will happen as adoption increases.
I have 3 remaining questions. The first 2 are, where are your graders located? So if I'm shipping bees from, I don't know, let's say Ohio, Kim's shipping bees from Ohio, and he wants them graded before they get to, would you even recommend grading them before they left Ohio?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this year we're doing all of our grades out in California. But if we did have somebody, we haven't had somebody that wanted to grade yet before shipping. I think we work with mostly California beekeepers and brokers. We would probably work with the partner discount where we're making sure they're trained, they have cameras, and then they could take the images themselves. I think rather than have the distribution where we can send graders out. That's the method, and that's how we're distributing to some of these next crops we're doing later in the spring here. We're actually not going out and ourselves grading all of them. We have partner graders that are doing so. So that's the way that I think it makes more sense for us and for the beekeeper, because it's cheaper if they take the images themselves too.
It was definitely complicated because of COVID as well.
Yes.
No doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Travel. And is it too late to book for any of the coming seasons in 2021?
No, it's never too late. And if we're short on almonds here, or wrapping up or filled up on almonds here, we'd be happy to give you guys early sign-up discounts for next year. So we do that. And we're pretty good at working with our growers and beekeepers. We get a lot of last-minute requests and figure out how to fit them in because that's just the nature of what we do. Growers are busy, beekeepers are busy, and sometimes they're making that decision and solving a problem that day. So we're pretty flexible to work with people and make sure we send out, especially for almonds, make sure we have enough people out there to be able to account for that.
And one last question, and I'll let Kim wrap it up, is what's your history with bees? Is your family in beekeeping, or how did you get interested and get wrapped up into the Bee Corp and Verifli?
So it was summer after freshman year in college. I was bored with lifeguarding and Googled volunteer opportunities. And there was a beekeeper for a sort of nature educational center that needed some help managing the hives there. He's a beekeeper in Ohio, and he taught me the ropes, and I was quite fascinated to learn about honeybees. I then came back to college and was a part of a garden group that ran the campus garden. It's now a farm and doing a much higher production. And we were encouraged to start projects, and I thought getting bees for the garden made a lot of sense. So I received a grant to start up a couple beehives and finally become a hobbyist beekeeper myself. And all of that was, almost 10 years ago now. I've since developed an allergy and no longer get to keep bees for fun. But I luckily still get to get in the bees about once a month when we go out and do testing.
Very good. Well, that's fun. That's good to hear that you took a passion for a hobby and bees and turned it into Verifli, and that's exciting.
Thank you. My co-founder and I are pretty amazed at what a college interest has grown into. We had no idea it would take us this far.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah,
That's really nice.
What have we missed, Ellie?
I mean, I think we've really covered the gamut. I guess I would say if folks have follow-up questions or want to chat or are curious about certain things, we have contact forms on our website where they go right to us, and we'll get in touch with them. And we are happy to answer any questions. You'll be surprised. We sometimes help beekeepers with labeling laws. We have a labeling law blog that is one of the most visited pages on our website. So really, we're just happy to help beekeepers of all sizes and share what we know. But that's a great way to get in touch if there's something that we missed here.
Well, that webpage will be on the show notes.
We'll have the show notes. Yeah, it's a very good website.
It is. I encourage people to go look at it just because it's fun to look at.
Ellie Symes of Bee Corp, thank you so much for joining us on Beekeeping Today podcast, and look forward to hearing from you down the road.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having me.
It was fun to hear from Ellie on the show. It's what they're doing and taking an existing technology and turning it a little bit, adding a little bit more to it, and creating a new service for beekeepers and growers.
You know, almonds haven't quite started when we're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Almonds start about the first week of February, and we're in the middle of January. And I'm thinking that a beekeeper that was smart would probably try and hook up with these guys this year, even if they can't get them until their hives are in the orchards. At least they can reassure the growers how strong their colonies are. But boy, for other crops coming down the road, blueberries and apples and everything the rest of the year, you can get your crops. The thing I like about it, I think the best, is you can do it yourself. They'll send you a camera, you take the picture, upload it to the cloud. Their software analyzes it, and tomorrow you'll know how strong every one of the colonies you took a picture of is, and you can get an average count. This is groundbreaking, I think. I'm really impressed.
I agree. I think it's exciting. Like I said just moments ago, that they were everyone. You can go down to your local hardware store just about and get a FLIR camera, or order one from Amazon. But the secret sauce is their software in the cloud that takes that image and is able to provide meaningful and actionable information for the growers and beekeepers, and saves money, saves bees, and makes money.
Saves time and money.
Yeah,
and growers are getting what they're paying for. Beekeepers aren't spending money handling colonies that aren't strong. The figure I like the best that she came up with is that a colony with 20,000 bees, which is a pretty strong colony, is going to produce 7,000 more foragers than a colony with only 10,000 bees, which is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 frames. 7 to 10 frames is going to produce that many more thousand foragers. And if I'm a grower, that's what I want. I want bees in the flowers. I don't want bees in the box.
That's fun. That is really good. So kudos to Ellie Symes and her team at the Bee Corp and the great work that they're doing. Look forward to hearing more from them.
Yep. And I gotta reinforce this just a little bit more. Think about beekeepers moving bees for honey. If I got to put bees on the truck and take them someplace, like the tallow that I was just talking about, if I'm taking them to down south for tallow for an early crop, why would I take, weak colonies? Why don't I leave them there and let them grow up slower rather than put them on a truck, pay for the freight, have them get down there and not have enough population to make a good honey crop? So there's a lot of uses for this, and I think beekeepers should pay attention.
And the key point being, they could go through all their colonies using this technology without opening up, without disturbing, without the risk of queen loss or anything else.
1,000 colonies in one night. One person can examine 1,000 colonies in one night. Think about that.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. That's pretty cool technology. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review. We love reviews, especially great reviews, and let other beekeepers looking for a new podcast know what you like. You can get there directly from our website by clicking on the reviews button along the top of any web page. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued support of Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. We also want to thank Strong Microbials for their support. Check out their probiotic line at www.strongmicrobials.com. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions or comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else you want to mention, Kim?
I think that about wraps it up, Jeff. Just, I guess, stay warm and stay safe.
Better throw another log in that fire.
Okay. Take care, guy.